This is my Super Cub that I owned with Josh Powell, my other friend in Georgia. And he was much bigger than Wallace. He had a terrible time. But he wanted a short fill airplane, and we shopped around and looked at a lot of airplanes, including Stinson's 105s that he bought first, and they just didn't get the short fill good enough. So we looked some more and found this one. It was kind of a real shade tree mechanics job. There's a bunch of guys up in Kentucky had cobbed it together, to say, out of parts from a junkyard. The fuselage was twisted a little bit and been patched here and there, and the landing gear turned out, the movable pieces of landing gear had two bunches. One came from one series Super Cub, one from another. We had to change that after we got it, but we got it pretty cheap, and it ran pretty good. And the first thing that we started enjoying flying all right, but the first event after we got it was that I had found out when I flew to Josh. We flew up in Josh's twin, and then he flew the twin home, and I flew the Cub home. And en route, I was flying along, and the engine quit. Just flying along and quit. And
no warning, huh?
No, just it's gone. And after checking what I could, mags and fuel was the main thing. After I changed tanks, it's got a left-right off selection on the tanks, and after I changed tanks to the left, I was on the right when it quit. Changed to the left, and it picked up and started running good. And I was kind of sat light for about 20, 30 minutes, but it didn't quit anymore. Went on home, had no trouble, and told Josh about it. But we decided that let's say the checklist that came with the airplane with Piper from Piper said take off. Yeah, it says take off on the left tank. So that's what we were doing. But I had been en route for that longer trip. I had shifted to the right, back and forth, which is a general habit to be sure before I get too far from the airport, be sure everything's feeding all right.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I ran into that quit. And we flew for quite a while, and finally decided that Josh never pushed me into this sort of thing. I just decided that I'll do something about that one of these days. I didn't have any idea what it was. It certainly seemed like fuel feed, but on the other hand, we checked fuel feed, they run fine, no problem with anything that we could find. But I didn't investigate thoroughly enough, and so Josh helped me, and we pulled all the cylinders off and took the cylinders down to engine shop below Atlanta and got them to overhaul the cylinders and put them back on ourselves, which is very illegal. Because we weren't mechanics. We did that all right. Then it ran fine for a while after that, and very shortly after that, though, shifted to that right tank again, and bang, the engine quit again after all that trouble. So then I got a little bit smarter, which I should have been in the first place, and went to my really good mechanic, old-time mechanic friend, JB, and explained this whole sequence to him. And he said, well, have you checked the rate of fuel flow? And I said, no, I just checked the fuel flow. And he said, well, you got to check the rate of fuel flow. And I thought about that a little while and said, okay. So we got some big cans and went up to the airport and unhooked the fuel down here and ran on the left tank a little while and checked how fast to fill the can up. Then we turned it over to the right tank and checked it, and it filled up the tank a little time. Wasn't running good.
Uh-huh.
And it would run the engine, but it wasn't near as much as the right. It wasn't free flow, obviously.
Yeah.
So that settled the problem. So took the fairing off, wing fuselage fairing there where the fuel line goes up. Actually on this airplane, it goes up the inside that cover, strut cover right there, and down the strut right here and into the wing. And then each wing, there's a little sump depression at the bottom of the tank to make sure the lowest part of fuel to all run in there. And in that is where the fuel line comes in, and on the end of the fuel line is what's called a finger strainer. It's about as long as your finger.
Yeah. It's
a little screen, and it's about as big around as your finger. And it's on the end of the fuel line. And that's to keep main big trash. It won't keep a little tiny trash out, but it'll keep big trash out. And looked in this left tank, which is the one that had been quitting, and looked in there good with a, pulled that line, which pulled the strainer out in the open between the wing, looked in there with a flashlight real good. In that finger strainer was a little brownish, blackish ball, tannish, I'd say tannish. I remember it so clearly because it's so stupid to me to have to get this far. Had the overhaul 4 cylinders, wasted all that money, and that little ball in there. And every time the fuel started flowing down that line, that little ball obviously was rolling, turd it, sucking turd it, and stopping it up. So it would run anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, and then boom, every time. That little ball is made by mud daubers.
No kidding.
Yeah, a little wasp. And then all these wings and fuselages, all these parts, these guys in Kentucky had found at a junkyard and put it all together. They cleaned it up pretty good, but
I've seen things like that with a ball that's in there for purpose. It's a shutoff. The mud daubers had made a shutoff ball for you.
they sure had. It worked fine too. It had, that screen is fairly rough. It was about I'd say less than a 16th gap squares in the screen wire going around. So it was fairly rough. That ball of mud that was in there, the daubers had built it, and then it had finally broken loose and started sliding back and forth. And the more it slid, the more it wore itself, and it got smooth as a little perfect ball. And worked fine then.
How do you think the mud daubers got in there?
Well, the whole thing was stored apparently 20 to 30 years before we got it, before it was built. So they just made home everywhere they could.
Huh.
And there's something that everybody that deals with airplane knows when an airplane's stored, they're going to be insects get into everything. You really
Especially spider webs and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Anything. And they had cleaned pretty good everywhere but that. They didn't quite get that. It was a pretty hard one because it was probably, when it was built, and it was probably up in the line instead of in the open screen. They probably couldn't even see it if they looked at the screen.
Yeah.
They probably did look at the screen, I would imagine, but they didn't see it, and then it broke loose and got in there and wore itself smooth. So that made an interesting start to that airplane. In the meantime, before we solved this problem, we were always taking off and turning right. It was pretty quick off the runway, and then straight parallel to runway, a couple of 100 feet off, and stay there until we had at least 400 or 500 feet in case we get back on the runway. It wouldn't be right over it. It'd be hard to turn. You had more turn to get back on. So after that, we could climb straight out. After that, we lost our fear of it quitting. Let's see. I don't think anything else particular.
Okay, I think there's another picture of it there.
Yeah, well, that's up at Pat Hartness's Triple Tree Restaurant, Triple Tree RC Field in Greenville, South Carolina. I went by myself some. Wallace went with me sometimes. Josh never did care for RC, so he didn't go, but we went up there quite often. So that was just one of our good trips we enjoyed. It was about an hour and 20 minutes from home to the field.
Yeah.
Just a nice flight. This airplane, I flew this airplane so much it just got to be like going home every time I sat down in it.
Just like an old slipper, comfortable slipper.
Yeah, just natural, just right.
Why don't you flip one more? I think there's another one more of that.
There it is.
And I think there's even
I
another
thought
one.
it was ugly with that yellow stripe on it. That the guy that sold it to us, he was a real country guy, and we both made fun of him all the time. But I didn't like that at first, but after I got used to it, well, I guess I liked it pretty good.
How long did you have this plane then?
I can't remember exactly, probably 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And near the let's see, the year before I left Georgia, let's say 2000, I talked Josh into I had sold I had owned half of it with him, and sold my half back to him at that time, because I was thinking about leaving, and he decided he wanted, when the annual came up, the wing fabric didn't test good, so he wanted to recover them, and I talked him into that. And then Lee Kluger, who's another friend who's got the biplane rides in Georgia and got that picture over the desk in there, that camera picture showing between the wings, remember, in my room in there?
Yep.
Lee's a mechanic, and he had never covered the wings, so he decided he would take that job and try to make a little money. He was always making a little money here and there, and so I told him I would help him because I knew how to do the covering and everything, and so we took the wings off the Cub in the T-hanger and left the fuselage and carried the wings over to Lee's house and worked in Lee's basement for a couple of months and then recovered those wings. And I helped Lee all along the way, but he did most of the work. But the main thing I remember was, like the model that I've got in here, it's got a Super Cub, it's got a scallop, a yellow wing with a scallop, red scallop leading edge, and that's the way I did it. And Lee was willing to paint it that way, go to the extra trouble to paint this scallop like that and tape, but he wouldn't try to tape it, so I had to tape off that scallop, mark it off and tape it for him, and then he sprayed it. And that's the way it was until Josh sold this to the guy named Chris Biddle just a year and a half ago, I guess. There near me, he lived near McCollum. He had another airplane, I forgot what kind, Cessna of some kind, but he wanted a Super Cub. So he finally talked Josh into selling it to him, and then he sent me pictures. He had recovered the whole airplane again and put all the Alaska Bush mods on it. Got a 180 engine and a bore prop and the extended landing gear and the great big tires and a baggage compartment. There's a tube in the original Piper fuselage that goes diagonally across the top of the baggage compartment behind the back seat. And everybody in Alaska takes that out because they need to put a whole moose in there. So they always take that out. And so this guy agrees to put that mod in there, took the bar out and put a door on top so you could load the baggage from behind the wing on top. Made it a lot better for carrying a lot of freight. In Alaska, what I read, they get the pilot in the front seat and they just fill up the rest of the back end full of stuff in the corner like that. Ad on TV about stacking firewood. They just fill it up with everything, and it goes. They never have any trouble. Every pilot that writes about Super Cub says, "Well, you have trouble with some airplanes, but you never have any trouble with a Super Cub. It'll fly if you get it moving at all, no matter what you put in it." And I guess that's about the truth. They seem to do very well.
Now that's at a radio control airplane field?
Yes, that's at Pat Hartness' place.
And so you went up there was some event. Did you take planes with you in the airplane to fly?
No, I never did take airplanes.
You just went up to watch?
I wouldn't say never. When we first started going up there, used to carry airplanes up, but in these years, I wasn't taking airplanes up there. They had so many people. They would have, on a bad day, they would have 500.
Wow.
And on a good day, they might have 1,500.
Was this the actual same field that they flew RC on?
Yeah.
So they would let you take off and land, and they'd stop flying, huh?
Yeah, they just stopped flying and take off. The original field, Pat Hartness owned this, I don't know how many acres, a lot of acres, and he had a big house way back over in the woods. And this strip was 1,800 feet long. The only difficulty at this end, it was downhill and leveled off, and then went up a little bit, and then leveled off a little bit, and then went down a little bit, and there was a big power line, transmission line across this end, but it was still 1,800 feet. Pat had a Stearman, a Spartan Executive, a J3, and something else. I can't remember what the other airplane was that he kept in his hangar, which is right back over here in this picture. Pat is the owner of all this, and he's the guy, he owns the present Triple Tree restaurant, which Triple Tree RC field, which has got a 7,000 foot runway now. When he bought it, the first year he made 5,000, and they kept building it longer and longer. It's about 20 miles away from this out in the country, and they have even bigger. That's where they have the RC event now that they advertise every year. The biggest in the world.
It is, yeah.
And it's a beautiful place. But this was beautiful. This runway was, talk about you cutting grass. This runway was like a golf green all the time, all the way, all over, 1,800 feet. It was just perfect.
Wow.
Best for RC or Cubs, either one. But he flew his Spartan off of it. Spartan, not a short-field airplane. But Pat built, he had this fifth strip graded and built. Then he built a gazebo, just a top thing, right up on top of the sill for everybody, the RCers to sit. Then he built back over here, he built a hangar and kept his own airplanes in that. And he built them all himself, 100%. He was a great modeler and a woodworker, apparently enjoyed that. He had all the woodworking tools in there and actually got that hangar built. There was a shed type part of it on the back. It had work tables and all the tools a modeler could imagine back there, and lots of them. I mean, like, I don't know how many, it must have been 15 or 20 tables.
Wow.
And every time we had this big crowd there and people crash, the 2 or 3 would take that crash, go down there to that hangar, and the next day they'd come out with another airplane. They had rebuilt it.
Wow.
He had everything you could ever want as a modeler down there. It was just beautiful. And his tradition there, that one of the things that made it so popular, not only a nice place, his dad, Pat's dad, was an RCer also, never as enthusiastic as Pat, but his dad was an RCer, and his dad was the one who had started the machine business that they made their money from. And every Saturday night, they had a Saturday, Sunday meet. Every Saturday night, they'd build a big hollow down here in front of the hangar. They built a big bonfire, and they would provide barbecue for everybody that came.
Wow.
So they had, like I said, they had sometimes 1,500 people, and they served them all.
Jeez.
You know, one of the traditions has been, that's why it's so popular today, because there's so many people just grew up going to meets there, you know.
Yeah.
But
And where's that in? Georgia?
that's in Greenville, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Wallace and I started going up there when we first started our singing in Atlanta, and around there, out of there. We knew about there was a club. We had a club, and there was a club in Atlanta, and there was one in Greenville. And my friend Frank had moved to Greenville and got a flying job there, and so I went to see him and met the RCers up there, and Pat, and then Wallace and I would fly and or drive up there and start carry our airplanes up there and fly with that Greenville bunch. And it got going back and forth so much that the Greenville bunch started coming down our field in Marietta. And as a bunch, you know, they'd come down, we'd have some kind of a get-together or something. But just got together good over the years. And Pat and a friend of his at home there built one of the first Homebuilts in the area, a Volkswagen, that little bitty Volkswagen thing powered by half a Volkswagen engine. A VP-1 it was called. And he and his friend built it, and I went up there to fly RC one weekend, and Pat got me over the side and said, "We got this little airplane ready out here, but we haven't flown it yet. We don't think we want to. How about coming and flying?" I said, "Well, I'll see what it looks like." So we drove over to the airport, and I looked around pretty good. It looked good to me. So I took off in it, and the engine ran good, and it flew good. So I went over to the RC field with it, and landed at the RC field with it, and Pat said, "Oh, that's what I want to see if it would land at the RC field. That's what I wanted to do."
Huh, that's cool.
So that was a good part of the story there. But
What was that called again? VP-1?
VP-1 was the Volksplane, I believe.
Okay. And the guy's name is Pat Tribble?
Pat Hartness. No, Pat Tribble is the one that Roy Cedartown making models of.
Oh, that's right.
This is Pat Hartness. H-A-R Hart, H-A-R-T-N-E-S-S.
Okay.
Hartness. And again, he's the guy that owns the Triple Tree International RC event these days.
Mm-hmm.